I started Sex Ed with DB. It's your go-to podcast for smart, science-backed sex education, delivering trusted insights from top experts in the field of, sex, sexuality, and pleasure. The sex ed you always wanted.
What is squirt? Talk me through it. What are the fluids?
Masturbation has proven health benefits. And, we know from scientific studies that it reduces stress, it improves sleep, it boosts mood. It supports pelvic health. It helps with period cramps. Like there are so many things. And it also feels good. We like it.
Yeah,
we enjoy it.
One happened to be up against a dumpster in Mykonos. But and we really took time to break it down of what were these moments that made me really enjoy sex.
Welcome back to Blonde Highlights. We are here today. We have a very special guest. We have Danielle Bezalel. I hope I'm saying that right. I think I did. Okay, I'm getting the thumbs up. Danielle has a master's of public health from Columbia University, is a sex educator and host of the top sex ed podcast, Sex Ed with DB. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We're going to have a blast.
I know it. Like I love talking about all these topics, so I'm really excited. First of all, just to let you all know where Danielle and I connected, I actually found her through Tink Media, which if you are starting a podcast or you have a podcast, it's a really great tool for connecting. And then I listened to the podcast and fell in love right away. So tell us a little bit.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, it's an amazing podcast. I love it. It's really exciting. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into sex education. How'd you get here?
I would love to. So my mom is an OBGYN. So first and foremost, how I talk about it is that we talked about placentas over pizza. So she would come home from a delivery and be like, oh my God, the placenta was stuck up there. And I'd be like, Mom, I'm eating my pizza. Like, what's going on here? So she made us very comfortable, me and my brothers growing up, with the topic of, periods and sex and kind of asking questions. And I think from the get-go, as you said, Kris, everyone loves talking about sex. And so
Yes.
I think as a teen, was very much like that person who my friends would come to kind of ask for advice. And then, moving forward through college, I ended up studying film and media and minored in education. I just loved storytelling and documentary and that kind of stuff. And then, Trump got elected the first time in 2016. And I was like, this fucking sucks. This feels so bad. Our reproductive rights are just continuously being taken away. And so, in 2017, started the podcast just out of, a hobby to say, let's fight back and let's kind of talk in this unashamed way about sexual and reproductive health. And here we are 8 years later, which is pretty wild and fun.
That is so exciting. I do have to say that you and I, as soon as you had me at placenta, I actually, I used to work at a hospital and I was a house cleaner. And I was made fun of because my fascination was, I need to see the placenta. And finally, a nurse took me to the bin so I could actually see one. And I was fascinated by it.
Let's take
She's like, you know what, let's go. We'll go to the bio bin. You can see it. And I was like, wow. I thought it was so cool.
That's the one thing is we both kind of grew up in sex positive households, especially I. But my whole family works in the medical field. So it was the same thing of just the conversations at dinner were just so cut and dry. Because it's everyone from the emergency room to the dentist to the, every form of it. And it's just talking about surgeries and everything. Just none of us are fazed by it.
Right. Yeah. She's like, oh my God, my shoes were covered in blood. I'm just like, oh my God, there's a lot going on. Yeah. Birth stories can be wild. She's just like, oh man, we lost a lot of blood, but she was okay. And the baby was okay. And it's just a, battlefield. She has delivered thousands of babies. So it's just a crazy, crazy thing bringing life into this world.
Yeah. What a gift. Actually, you know what? When I worked on the birthing units, I would hear sometimes the final push and then the baby cry. And even
Oh,
being
man.
outside the room like that, it is so cool. Like there's something really
special.
magical about it.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast a little bit. Like walk us through that. Like you said that it kind of started as like a passion thing. Like let us know.
Yes. So yeah, like I started Sex Ed with DB, like I said, about 8 years ago. The current kind of like one-liner about it is it's your go-to podcast for smart, science-backed sex education, delivering trusted insights from top experts in the field of, sex, sexuality, and pleasure. And it's basically, I kind of describe it as the sex ed you always wanted, because many of us, especially if we grew up in America, got Garbagino sex education. And I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I still, only really received like STI education and drug and alcohol education. Like none of it included like birth control options or period management or pleasure, of course, or anything like that. And so that's really what the podcast aims to do. And currently, we're kind of at the end of a fun mini series that we're doing called Rom-Com Vom, where in every episode we go under the covers with a beloved rom-com, like You've Got Mail, classic terrible Shallow Hal, like all the like 90s and early 2000s rom-coms. I just did an episode today and recently, doing like The Wedding Singer and all of those like movies
So
from our
cool.
childhood, basically. And we strip away their hidden toxic messages and we rewrite the script on love and sex. And so basically that's a whole other like mini series, but the bottom line of all of the episodes, Kris has your mouth open. You're excited.
I'm like, it's so cool.
Yeah. The bottom line though is that, we're a sex ed podcast that aims to empower people to make happy and healthy decisions for their lives. And so that includes all sorts of topics: sex workers' experiences, abortion information and education, birth control options, what it looks like. We did Juno for Rom-Com Vom. We talked to an adoption researcher and like talked about the realities of adoption and, just anything you can think of that has to do with sex ed. We probably have covered it in an episode.
I love it. And you know what? When I was learning about sex ed, I went to a Catholic school and I learned from a Fully Alive book. I don't know if you know what that is, like the Fully.
No.
That was like the standard curriculum book, Fully Alive. And it was very basic. It was just like, when a mom loves a dad, and it was very much, it kind of gave the science background, which for the age that I started is fine, but there was really nothing except for I had this one teacher who he stepped outside the box and he gave us real cutting edge information in grade 7. He taught us about oral sex. He taught us about everything. And we were like, oh my God, what is this? But we knew what it was. And I feel like, especially in this day and age, it's so important for especially young teenagers to really know what you're getting into, because once you kind of start being sexually active or anything, it opens a whole other chapter of your life. Like
Totally.
Yeah. And I grew up in a very rural part of Ohio, and our sex ed was, we went into one, those little trailers they put outside of school? And you have class in there. We went into a trailer and they had a couple diagrams, and it was like,
they were like, you're relegated outside.
Yes.
yeah.
And it was just so short. There was hardly anything. It was just like the basics of the basics, and not a lot of talk of, STDs or or STIs or how anything. It just didn't answer hardly any questions at all for people.
So
Classic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, very classic.
yes. So before we get into some questions on Blonde Highlights, we do like to highlight our highlight and low light of the week. So what's your highlight this week?
Ooh, I would say my highlight is probably that I recently returned from my honeymoon.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I got married last year in August, and my husband and I were like, let's kick the can down the road and like do our honeymoon next year. There was a lot of planning involved, and we wanted to take a little space. And so we went to Japan for 2 weeks and just had the best time, and ate the best food and saw the most beautiful nature. And yeah, we got back I'm cheating. We got back a week ago, but I would say that's still one of the highlights of my life. It was very fun. Such a blast.
That's amazing. And I'm glad you actually did it, because a lot of people were like, okay, we'll wait till next summer to go on our honeymoon. And then they don't.
Right.
They never go.
People don't do it?
No, no. And my parents always say this. They're like, well, we still haven't gone on that honeymoon 40 years later.
It is time for them to book a flight.
Yes.
How long is it taken?
Yes.
What is your anniversary date?
August 10th.
Oh, so close. My birthday's the 11th. We're both August babies. So I was like, okay, does it land on one of our days?
That's so cute. Okay, August 10th will always hold a very special place in my heart.
There we go.
Yes.
And what is your low light this week?
Low light. I would say like coming back from a 2-week trip, you're kind of like, whoa, like my inbox is quite full. I didn't at all check any email or do any sort of work while I was away. And you kind of forget that being off for 2 weeks, leads to a lot of projects, a lot of headaches when you come back. So my low light is just like, I think I worked until like 8 p.m. last night just because there was just so much shit for me to do.
Yeah.
And to catch up, but it was worth it.
Okay.
That can be so overwhelming.
What about
Totally.
you?
Well, I thought I would do my highlights and lowlights in the sex ed world, is what I was kind of thinking. And I would definitely say my highlight would be that I was raised in such a sex positive household, and sex was such a untaboo topic, and it was a regular type of topic. And so I've always felt a sense of, I've always just really liked that about my parents, or really admired that they took that initiative, especially growing up in such a rural, like conservative area, that they were so upfront with that. And I know my mom probably taught so many girls I went to school with sex ed, basically, and gave, a realistic, really good approach to it. And they were really serious about how sex should never be seen as shameful. And I just thought that was normal. And I didn't realize how uncommon that could be. And
Completely.
so that's definitely a highlight of that. My low light is being transgender. Like, there is such a, like, people fetishize the sex so much, and people really try to make it weird, or so they try to make it something kind of taboo or something in a way, and really push the fetish to it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like killed sex for me a little bit.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Guys, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, please treat trans people like people, with respect and dignity.
Yes.
Okay. My highlight is my husband and I actually got to have sex the other week without kids in the house. And
Hell yeah.
that is like, oh my God, it's like night and day difference, like there's been times where, the kids are home, we're in the closet, we're doing laundry together, whatever. But this was like, oh my God, like I can lay here, I can take my time. I can there's no fear of like one of the kids is going to like break into the room, so much goes through your head. So,
how old are your kids, may I ask?
9 and 10.
That's tough, because they're probably always around, just kind of, just there.
They're there. They're the shadows. Like, they are my shadow. Like, they're my best friends, honestly. Like, I love them. But it's at that point where it's like, if one of them walks in, they're going to know that we're not just wrestling, like
They're
something
very self-aware.
up here. My low light will be, and this is maybe a TMI, but
Never. I don't believe in TMI.
okay. Queefing or needing to fart during sex.
Absolutely not TMI. I'd love to talk about that at some point if you're interested.
Always interested. I'm always
Yes.
interested. Look, I'm really lucky. Like, my husband's just like, whatever. He's basically like, if you need to fart, just fart. Like, who cares? Like, we don't care. But it's like, there is just like that pressure that happens when all of a sudden like a queef comes on, and then you're just like, in my head, I'm just like, fuck. Like, he doesn't give a shit. And he didn't even notice. But in my head, it's like, all of a sudden it takes away the mood for me.
Totally. I mean, yeah, that can happen. I feel like, silly sounds. I mean, listen, sex is silly. We're kind of smashing our body parts against each other, making weird noises. We're sweating, we're smelling. There's a lot of things that are going
Yeah.
on. So cooking is totally part of the equation.
Okay, awesome. So let's get into some of our questions. We've compiled a
Yes.
list, and like, again, this is so exciting. Like, I love talking about this. Okay,
Yes.
let's go here. Sorry, I can't. Where did I put my questions? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So in sex, there are levels of orgasms.
Different kinds.
Can you explain those or walk us through what that looks like?
Absolutely, I can.
Yes.
So there are many different types of orgasms. I'll just name the most common, few. There's the, clitoral orgasm. There's and this is specifically, we're talking people with vulvas, but if we're talking people with penises, there are also other kinds of orgasms. But I'm focusing right now on people with vulvas. So clitoral orgasms, vaginal orgasms, G-spot orgasms, anal orgasms, nipple orgasms, which I'm sure we'll get to, blended orgasms, meaning a combination of stimulation. So, for example, clitoral and G-spot. There's kind of a theory basically that like the G-spot really is just the engorged clitoris, and that's the reason why there's so much stimulation. That's the reason why a G-spot orgasm occurs, is because the clitoris is also being grinded up on and getting stimulation. But yeah, essentially there are many different kinds of orgasms. And if you're interested, I'm happy to walk you through nipple orgasm, since that's maybe on our agenda.
Yes, because Kris, she thinks she's had one, so we got to know about.
I have had a nipple orgasm. I'm certain of it. And I've almost felt like, okay, so my nipple play is very sensitive and it has to be done in a certain way, or I'm like, don't touch me. But I swear I had a nipple orgasm. Is that possible?
It is. Yes. I'm here to tell you that it is possible. Nipple stimulation can also activate this thing called the genital sensory cortex. So studies do show basically that nipple, clitoral, vaginal, and cervical stimulation can all activate overlapping brain regions. So essentially, the pathways that are being turned on can be overlapping. And also, a nipple orgasm, if you think about it, nipples are erogenous zones, right? Like very sensitive parts of our bodies that contribute to our pleasure. And so, absolutely, I believe you. I'm sure you've had a nipple orgasm. If you think you have, you probably have.
I feel so validated right now.
And I have a question on that too. And this is off topic, but look, what is the kind of difference between like a male nipple orgasm or a female? Because I know just like pre-transition, I felt like nipple play was more being used. Like I felt like there was more sensitivity than now, where now the nipples it's a completely different situation than it was from before.
I mean, listen, I think that similar, all people, most people, I will say, have nipples. Few people have gotten them removed if there's any sort of breast cancer or things like that, but most of us do have nipples. And so even if it's a male nipple, if we're thinking about the erogenous zones, right? Thinking about pleasure, there are some people even who are able to have orgasms, right? By like breath and by meditation and by touching of certain parts of your body, right? It like doesn't necessarily need genital touch in order to receive orgasm. So with male bodies, right, we're thinking of penis orgasms, we're thinking of prostate orgasm, we're thinking of anal orgasm, right? And if, you're receiving a lot of stimulation from the nipple, definitely like that can still release something in you to feel like you're getting a peak of pleasure and then a release of the orgasm. I think it's less common because I think there are less nerve endings in male nipples, or maybe they're just less sensitive, or it's not as common as a way for cis men or people with penises to get orgasms, but it definitely is possible. Like I think there's and this is kind of a tangent, but it's interesting. I had someone on my podcast once who ended up being from an accident, paralyzed from like the chest down. And
Mhm.
he talked about the fact that after his accident, something was occurring where when someone would rub his thumb in a certain way and his hand in a certain way, he would be able to achieve orgasm. So I think the answer is that there are many things that we don't know about the human body, but if you feel pleasure from something, you should follow your bliss and feel comfortable to feel pleasure in that way.
Yeah, this is so interesting about these. Because a lot of these different types of orgasms I hadn't even thought about, and it's like ringing in my head because I think of my journey into becoming a trans woman. There was definitely the orgasm was different, and then once I really started to go from trying to top to bottoming, I stopped being really orgasming from that type of pleasure. And instead, it was almost like the dominance, not even so much dominance, but the way that I was treated in that way, my orgasms changed in it completely changed in that way. And so then I started orgasming just from bottoming without any sort of like pleasure to my penis at all.
Wow. So it's very much like a psychological thing that you're talking about in the way in which that you're engaging with sexuality and the way
Yeah.
that you're engaging with sex with a partner.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say I hadn't even thought of that way, but I was like,
You just had an awakening.
Maybe.
yeah.
I mean, you obviously know your own body best, but absolutely there's like a big piece of mental health and psychological feelings about our bodies and about our sexuality and about our pleasure that play into the kinds of orgasms we enjoy, the kind of play we enjoy by ourselves and with a partner. So it's definitely that's definitely a part of it. But yeah, it's so I'm sure you talk about it on your podcast, but just like it's interesting to hear your experience pre-transition and post-transition. I'm sure that helps so many people like feel comfortable talking about their own experiences. So it's incredibly empowering that you're down, Kyle, to like chat about that with people.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so many things changed in the way too. And also just like feeling so much more comfortable in your own body. It changed everything as well, I think too. And that's kind of like
completely.
Yeah. On the next topic too, it's like leads into that. What advice would you have for people to, feel more comfortable in their body naked?
This is such a deep question because back to like the mental health and the psychological piece, right? Like shame really impacts how we view ourselves naked, especially for women, queer folks, people with vulvas, like particularly for those people, because we have been taught through media mostly and through culture that like white, cis, skinny bodies are the norm. And so it's really easy for us to look in the mirror and immediately look at what we don't like about ourselves. And so it's really important to do mirror work, right? Of like looking in the mirror and say like, I'm going to say 2 things that I genuinely love about my body today. And I'm just going to repeat that to myself every day. And like the more comfortable that we feel really believing like, hey, this is a really positive thing about myself. I love my eyebrow shape. I love my eyes. I love my mouth. I love my breasts. Like I love my curves, like whatever it is that you genuinely feel excited about, focus your energy on saying that to yourself. And when you catch yourself looking in the mirror, say, 2 minutes a day you spend doing this, right?
Okay.
Even if it's 10 seconds, start with 10 seconds and then maybe ramp it up a little bit more. The moment you start saying bad things about yourself. Oh, I don't like my stretch marks. I don't like my cellulite. I don't like this dumbass vein. I catch myself looking at a fucking vein in my leg and I'm like, I fucking hate that vein, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have stuff in our body that we don't like, but the less that we give that voice a platform and the more we focus on the things we genuinely love, then we're able to feel more comfortable being naked in our own bodies. And I think like the part B to this answer is in talking about masturbation and talking about self-pleasure, because it is incredibly empowering to be the person in charge of your own pleasure without feeling like you need someone else to depend on that for you. And so I'm somebody who really, really enjoys my own pleasure practice. Like it allows me to slow down. It allows me to focus on myself. It allows me to have a date with myself, right? Like whatever that looks like for you. If you're like listening to audio erotica or you're watching porn or you're, turning the lights off and putting some candles on or you're listening to music, you're getting out the massage oil for yourself, like that all contributes to like a body positive practice that allows you to really see the good parts of yourself and to really invest in your own pleasure, which like really has a great return on investment when you're looking at how to connect with yourself and with other people. Like once you are able to share your confidence and what you like in the bedroom and what you like sexually with other people, like that connection with somebody else, if you choose to have a relationship with someone else, is much stronger when you have that baseline.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it's just like in all relationships, sort of like you have to love yourself first in order to love somebody else. So I guess it would make sense that taking that time, like how you said, like have a date with yourself to really just like make it your own nice experience and like fall in love with doing yourself, but like doing it with yourself. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think, yeah, that's great advice. Okay.
Yeah.
I like
that. And I also want to quickly just speak to this idea of like body neutrality, right? Like a lot of us are taught like body positivity, like you go bitch, love yourself at every second of the day. And like sometimes that's like not really an option for people. Like some people just want to feel neutral about their body. And I think that's perfectly okay too. And I think that we should encourage people, if they don't want to be focusing on their body all the time, as long as we're not contributing to negative self-talk about our bodies and we're either being positive or being neutral, I think that's the space that we want to live in.
And I think that that's important to remember because there's so many pressures, like especially as a woman, especially with porn culture, to feel like you need to look a certain way or you need to have a certain type of vulva in order to really be presented as like hot and sexual. But it's like getting to know that you don't have to be like that. And I feel like that's something that I had to kind of get through. And I'm happy that I think just maturing and growing, I kind of got out of that, because being a curvier woman, I was always like, I'm not your typical girl that you're seeing on the porn that you're watching, and realizing that like that's something separate and like this is real life, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done some episodes on feeling neutral and, like sometimes like the expectation to be positive about yourself all the time can be a little much, but, feeling neutral and living in that.
So what are some stigmas around self-pleasure, especially for women?
Yes. I would say specifically there is religious messaging around you being unpure or, you not saving yourself for marriage if you are self-pleasuring, or you being used, right? Like there's so many metaphors that people use when it comes to women or people with vulvas or queer people masturbating. And, there's this stigma that masturbation is immoral or unnatural. And we've received a lot of messages that like cis men, like that's boys will be boys, like that's just normal, whereas like it's not celebrated, or it's disgusting if we're talking about it for women or queer people or people with vulvas. But the reality is that masturbation has proven health benefits, and we know from scientific studies that it reduces stress, it improves sleep, it boosts mood, it supports pelvic health. It helps with period cramps. Like there are so many things. And it also feels good. We like it.
Yeah,
we enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's
women
good.
like sex too.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
so yeah, it's important.
I know. I like to think of it as like with sex, I'm like, there can't be anything more natural. Like if you look at the animal world, like the world of on this earth of all living things, there is all some form of sex happening in some way.
Yes.
It's just
totally
the baseline of natural, being natural. And what do you think are sometimes like some of the psychological effects of being raised with so much shame around sex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of us, Kyle, you were very lucky. It sounds like coming from a household of sex positivity and being able to ask questions. And most people grow up in a household where sex and conversations around sex are very taboo, right? And so it really often leads to adult sexual shame and body image issues and anxiety around sex. I think like if we're in adulthood and we think about, I'm 32, like if I grew up in a household where I was super religious or I was raised in a place that didn't allow me to ask questions, like I would have to do all those years of unlearning, right? In order to feel comfortable moving on to the next step of what that could look like for me. And, going to therapy, going to sex therapy, engaging in sex positive content like Sex Ed with DB, and, exposure to inclusive education with trans people at the helm, with fat people at the helm, with people of color at the helm, like who are engaging you in sex education from a diverse group of people, can really work to kind of undo that harm, kind of like the mirror work, right? Of like really doing the homework of every day, looking in the mirror and saying two things that you like about yourself genuinely. It's the same kind of thing to undo that trauma and that harm that many of us learned as kids in school and from at home.
And just since we're on the topic, just to add in here, how would you, like, what advice would you have for, say, parents? Like, I have two young boys. Like, what do you recommend the approach be, or like, help me out here? Like,
yes, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to help. So I think that a misconception is that the sex talk only happens once, right? And that the idea that parents go to kids typically when they start asking questions is typically when you want to like figure out what the root of their question is and like what the age appropriate answer is, right? So maybe they heard about something about sex in a TV show, or maybe their friend saw it, right? Or, the average age that boys in America first see porn is 11, right? So it's thinking about, I know it's very terrifying to contend with, but it's true. And so thinking about, like, what does it look like to go to my kid, every so often, once a month or something, and be like, hey, like, I want you to watch this video with me, right? So like finding those resources about various kinds of topics that are age appropriate. One really great resource for kids like 9, 10, 11 is company called Amaze, Amaze, and they have YouTube videos that are animated that are all age appropriate, that essentially cover everything from puberty to periods to, porn literacy, to really like knowing the difference, like as a kid, between porn and real life. And it comes at the viewer with like a, hey, like maybe you've heard something about this. We just want you to be prepared if and when you do see something that you're not really supposed to be seeing, right? Like it very much is like written by sex educators, written by experts, led by people in the field. And so I think my advice to you would be not to just have a one-off sex talk, but to treat it like a lifelong endeavor. Even if your kids are, rolling their eyes at you. It's like, I know this sucks, but like, I gotta do it. I gotta do my part. Right.
Yeah.
And so, sending them videos or watching them with them, or, reading books that are written by experts, and looking at the websites, like written by experts, to really feel like, okay, I feel comfortable now, like in my own knowledge, in order for me to like contend with this with my kids. And then finally, it's okay that you will not know all the answers, right? Like your kid is, you are not expected to be perfect, but the expectation that I have for parents is that if a kid asks a question and you don't know the answer, you don't get mad or defensive, but say like, that's a great question. I'm going to do some research and then I'm going to get back to you, right? Because like there's always time. You're going to always have time to figure it out and to go back to your kids and say, okay, I have the answer I think that you're looking for. And know that as long as you're doing your best and stay positive and, keep a non-judgmental tone, like that's all you can do.
Okay, that is great advice. I think especially with my oldest, like he's in that stage now where we've kind of, because for me, it's that whole thing where it's like, I don't want to take away his innocence and get into too much, but I did give him a very honest sort of scientific, not scientific, but like just the basics of what happens without going into too much, because I'm like, he still is only 10, but he does need to know that he wasn't like ripped out of, the stuff.
Dropped from a store.
Yes, yeah. Like he was, like, so, okay, that's great advice.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you were talking about porn too, like what are some of your advice if you're encountering somebody with like porn addiction, and what are some of the things that kind of happen in our society from porn addiction?
Yeah, so porn addiction is a really interesting one because it kind of is existing in this like middle ground, because technically porn addiction is not formally recognized in the DSM-5, which is essentially like, the list of disorders that like the experts in the field of psychiatry, psychology have decided like, oh, this counts or doesn't count as a formal disorder. But compulsive porn use can absolutely impact relationships with other people, with yourself, and your mental health. And so I think like, each person, each individual is really different. I think similar to the kinds of questions that I ask, a common question I get is like, how do I know if I'm masturbating too much or if I'm addicted to masturbation, right? And the same questions can be, put on if you're thinking about porn. So do you, watch porn instead of doing your work or school? Like, is it getting in the way of your daily responsibilities? Most people, the answer is no, right? Like most people, if they watch porn, they're watching it because they're using it during sex or during masturbation, and they still like attend work, right? And like go to school or do those things. The second question is, do you feel like your porn use is hurting yourself or hurting someone else, right? So like thinking deeply about like, okay, even if I'm masturbating every day or watching porn every day, am I making someone else uncomfortable? Like, am I doing this in public or am I doing this in the privacy of my own home? Am I not hurting someone, right? And the same kind of questions, we ask for masturbation. So it's like important to figure out where you lie and like what nuanced take that you have. If you feel like, okay, yes, my porn use is getting in the way of my daily responsibilities, it is important to, not stigmatize that and know that like this is common for people to, use porn, and that mental health support is more helpful than like moral panic and really judging someone. So figuring out, again, if that is therapy, if that's sex therapy, like if maybe cutting porn use off completely would feel more healthy for you. But again, like as a sex educator, it's just so important to emphasize porn isn't going anywhere. And especially with AI, like we are in for it, right? Mm-hmm. So like the more that we tell people don't watch porn, same as we tell people don't have sex, be abstinent. Are people abstinent? No, they're going to have sex. Are people going to watch porn? Yes, they're going to watch porn. So it's more important, in my opinion, to do harm reduction and talk to people about, ethical porn, and talk to people about, maybe more realistic porn, right? Like, are we engaging with porn that has like real bodies and pays people and like, we can get into that. But I think like, when it comes to porn addiction, it's such a nuanced thing that it's really dependent on the person. And it's important for me to emphasize that, like, I don't think porn is going anywhere, and like shaming people into not watching porn does not work.
Yeah. And I've encountered porn that is made by women, and the storylines of like the emotional aspect of it.
Right.
It's really interesting to see that perspective, because I think a lot of them is so much hotter. And I notice like in the world of trans people, I notice that what happens with porn is that trans porn is unrealistic most of the time. And because I think most men that are attracted to trans women, a lot of them come from a place of stumbling upon the porn and becoming attracted that way and getting into that and being curious because of that. And a lot of trans porn is focused on trans women's like penises. And I should say this is a perspective of trans women porn. And there's such a focus and emphasis on penises and them being large or hard and all of these things. But the reality of trans women is that not most of the time, but a good amount of the time, estrogen is going to limit the function. And so a lot of men that are encountering trans women are so confused by, what do you mean there's limited function? Or what do you mean that, you can't do this or do that? And they don't, think about the idea. And I know that there's a lot of trans women that I know that are in porn, and they have to limit their estrogen, or they have to take no estrogen, or they take a smaller dose, which leads to more gender dysphoria. And body dysmorphia over that. And so I always think that's an interesting perspective with porn and trans people.
I feel like there's a big gap there. Kind of like, it feels like in the ethical porn world, I wonder like what the most popular and most realistic portrayal is of, trans women porn in particular. Like, there's a really great company called Make Love Not Porn, where they have make love not porn stars, aka just real people fucking and real people having sex. And it's kind of similar to like OnlyFans, right? Where like people can like post their own videos and then get paid for their own content, which I think has really like flipped the porn industry on its head in a good way. Because people are in charge of like and empowered of their own content and their pricing and all of that. So yeah, I think, Kyle, it's just really interesting what you're saying, because obviously this has come from like men's fantasies, like cis men's fantasies, and clearly it needs a rewrite.
Yes.
Just keeping on the porn here for just one more thing. What would you advise if, say, there's someone who has a partner that watches porn, but you don't like that they watch porn?
I would get curious about what they don't like about their partner's porn usage. Is it that their partner watches a kind of porn that they're uncomfortable with? Is it that they watch, quote unquote, too much porn in their eyes? Is it that the partner would be more interested in watching porn than having sex with them, right? Like, I think there's, again, like a lot of stigma and shame around like people's porn usage. And the reality is like, porn can offer healthy fantasy for people. And like the kind of porn that people engage with isn't necessarily the kind of porn that most of the time actually isn't the kind of porn or sex, that people want to engage with in real life, right? So like, we need to let our partners in general, again, not knowing too much about this particular situation, but in general, have the liberation and the ability to have their own fantasies and to be, their own sexual advocates and to have a healthy sex life with themselves, right? And porn can be a healthy part of people's sex lives. And so I think I would be curious to get more information as to like, again, is it like a jealousy thing? Is it the kind of porn, like what exactly it is that people are uncomfortable with?
I do plan on going down the road of getting bottom surgery. And what kind of advice would you give to any trans women, or even, I guess, trans men, as far as navigating new like sexual organs?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And we actually interviewed one of the top surgeons on Sex Ed with DB, named Dr. Blair Peters. And it was just so interesting hearing from him about this like top of the line surgery and how empowering it is to give people the right to have the body that they were destined to have, that they want to have. And so I think what I would say is like, listen to the experts in the field in terms of, your medical team, your mental health team, like what they are saying is really important for you personally and for your personal journey. I think in general, like it's really important to go slow, communicate, and explore with curiosity. So bottom surgery and top surgery, different kinds of surgeries, right, can take many, many months of healing. And especially when trying to figure out like what feels good, what different sensations do I have now that I have a new body or a different body, right? And so I think another in general kind of thing is like lube. Lube is really, really important. And especially, for folks who are getting bottom surgery, like it's really important to figure out, like, am I really dry, because my body's not making enough lubrication? Like, what exactly do I need, to be using a vibrator on a certain part of my body to get myself in the mood? Like figuring out what your body needs and your feelings around it can take time. So again, like, yeah, going slow, communicating, exploring, using lube, checking in with your medical team, and really like being up on like what they are recommending and what they're suggesting. And also making sure that you're in community with other trans people who have gone through the same thing. Like listen to podcasts by trans people, read books by trans people, follow people on social media who have gone through the same thing to make you feel, which you aren't, right? Like less alone in this, because there's so many other people who are cheering you on and who are going through the same journey of figuring out and navigating what it's like after surgery.
Yeah. And there was a book that I read by Janet Mock, who's a brilliant trans writer, and she discusses a big section in this book where after she had got bottom surgery, it was really frustrating because she was so used to an easier orgasm with a penis, and then having to like really learn and like patience and to really explore a lot to be able to figure out pleasuring herself with new body parts.
Yes, for sure.
What would your advice be for someone whose partner doesn't want them to use toys or even lube? Like they think like they can handle it all, or they're offended because like a toy's coming out. What are your thoughts? What is your take on this?
I love this question because I want to share with every partner out there who feels threatened by a toy, that is your teammate, not your opponent.
Right?
Again, that is your teammate, not your opponent. You're on the same team.
Yes.
There are common feelings that come up specifically for cis men around this of, oh, how am I not enough? How is my penis not enough? Right. And it's not about replacement. It's about enhancement, right? Like when we're thinking about an ice cream sundae, right? Like if you get just a scoop of vanilla, you're like, that's good. I like that. That's tasty. I will eat that. But if you think of sex toys as the whipped cream and the nuts and the chocolate sauce and the cherry, then you have a full sundae. And for many women in particular and people with vulvas, regardless of gender identity, we need clitoral stimulation in order to reach orgasm, point blank. And typically, a penis cannot do that trick based on angles, based on rhythm, based on movement. And so a mouth or fingers or a toy can more easily do the trick for people with vulvas more times than not compared to having sex with a penis. And so, I work with like amazing companies, like the iconic Magic Wand is one of my sponsors at Sex Ed with DB. And I work with a great, sex toy retailer called Lion's Den. And I work with this amazing silicone lube company called Uber Lube. And like, I talk about these companies so much on my podcast because not only do I feel like pleasure is such an important topic, but sex toys really, really do make our relationships, not only with ourselves, but with our partners better. We are able to both two people in a relationship or more, if you're kinky and fun, make pleasure work for all parties involved, everyone is happier. Mm-hmm. And if sex toys can help one of the people in that relationship reach their goal of feeling good, and even if orgasm isn't the goal, like sex toys are able to work in such a way that body parts just can't. And so rather than thinking about, oh, like how this is going to replace me, think about how it's going to enhance your relationship.
Okay. I like the analogy of the ice cream sundae because it is so true. And I
Yes.
do. I feel like women, like, you know, we're blessed with a clitoris, and I think that it's just like we have it so hard in life. Like, let us have our moment with the one thing that we got on our body that like makes sense. You know?
Yes,
Like,
it's purely pleasure based, right? Like
mm-hmm.
that's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say, I had a friend the other day who's a gay male. And he said to me, he was talking about like lesbian couples. And he's like, I don't understand how they like orgasm or how they get off. And I was just like, I looked at him and I was like, do you think that women only orgasm from penetration? And he was like,
Oh no.
yeah. And I was like, oh, lesbians
Oh, no.
are orgasming way more than.
Like, we don't
It's
need
true.
you.
It's true. It's true. You know, there with the orgasm gap, right? Like 90 something percent of straight cis men will orgasm, you know, when they have sex, when they have PV sex, and it's like 60 something, I think it's like 68% or something of cis women will orgasm, and lesbians it's like 80 something percent, right? And with gay men it's like 80 something percent or 90 something percent. Like, so it's important for us to be talking about this. And again, not like orgasm is the be all end all of sex, but it is a pleasure measure, and it's like a really important way that some people relax, de-stress, are able to like feel good in like the current fucking bullshit political climate that we're experiencing, right? Like pleasure is our own to own and to experience, and like it's our right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know, like, I'm somebody who I struggle with a lot of anxiety, and I always very much in my head and overthink everything. Like, what advice do you have for somebody to kind of get out of their head to enjoy sex a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, some of the things that I was talking about earlier with like the masturbation practice can apply here. So, like, you know, if you're getting prepared to have sex with a partner or with yourself, like doing a deep breathing exercise or a grounding exercise or a meditation or mindfulness technique, right? Like doing like a focusing session on your physical sensations, like starting light. Maybe it's just like you brushing your arm and then you're moving to your leg, you know, like really focusing on like one thing at a time can feel really, really good. And the more comfortable you are with your body and with your wants and your needs and your ability to communicate, the more that you will get into the moment. Um, and I do think part of this is figuring out if the partner that you're having sex with makes it easy for you to be in the moment, right? Like
Okay.
there are
Mhm.
certain partners that we could choose to have sex with that don't make us feel super comfortable about our bodies and about the sex that we're having. Kick them to the curb. They're not worth it, right? Like we want to engage with people who laugh with us at the queefs and
Yeah.
who don't
Yeah.
make fun of us and who find our bodies beautiful and who, you know, people to hype us up and to make us feel comfortable. And so it's a moment, I think, to reconsider like who you're fucking and if they're the right people to be fucking.
Yeah. And I know I had this when I started seeing a therapist on a regular basis. We had this discussion at one point because I was talking about sometimes like I've hit a place where I haven't always enjoyed sex. And a lot of times it's because I'm so in my head and so nervous about every little thing. And she was really like, can you think of some times when you really have enjoyed sex? And I think of these times, and they were very much like spur of the moment. There was no thought, no plan. It just happened. And one happened to be up against a dumpster in Mykonos. But and we really took time to break it down of what were these moments that made me really enjoy sex, and they were so spontaneous. And I
Love
think,
it.
because sometimes I think with anal sex, there is sometimes some planning involved, and I get too caught up in my head about everything else, and I'm like not in the moment.
Totally. That makes sense. I mean, spontaneity can really like spark desire and it can feel really sexy and feel really interesting. And like, you know, I think that's important to go through like the Rolodex of times that sex has felt good and try to figure out like what you can glean from that.
Yes.
Okay, the one that I've been really excited to ask you.
Squirting.
Well, yes. what is squirt? Talk me through it. What are the fluids? Because I'm sure that like I think one time it was just pee, maybe a couple times where I'm like, I don't know. But talk us through it. What is it?
Great. I'm happy to be here to talk about squirting. So the fluid, you're not wrong. The fluid of squirt is mostly urine with small amounts of fluid from a gland called the Skene's gland, which is kind of known as like the female prostate. And squirting kind of tends to occur with strong G-spot stimulation, bladder fullness, and someone feeling just like into it, like safe and relaxed. Not everyone squirts, and that's normal too. But yeah, squirting is this really interesting thing because in porn, right, like it's so over the top and there's so much fluid and like it's kind of getting wet and wild. And for some people it's like that, and for others it just doesn't happen. But that's what I can tell you about squirting.
Okay, cool. So there is some pee in it because
there is some pee.
Okay, so I had my first experience with my husband, and this was before we were married, and I was like, what? Like, it took me back for a minute because I didn't know what happened. And then I was like, did I pee? And then, of course, he's like, no, you squirt. Like, you know, his ego was a little bit boosted. Like, it's fine.
Sure. He's like, I did this.
Yeah, I'm the only one. Like, whatever. But I find that, like, sometimes in sex before that, I would have the feeling that I needed to pee.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got that feeling, that's when I would lose my orgasm because I would just like all of a sudden be like, I'm going to pee. I need to stop. Like I have to go pee. Is that feeling of pee your release of a squirt?
The feeling that you have of a full bladder? I mean, it sounds like, you know, having a full bladder can contribute to squirting.
Okay.
But we don't know that, you know, there's not enough like medical research and not enough funding to research female bodies, just in general, trans bodies, same thing. Like, and so with squirting, there has been like a back and forth of experts kind of going back being like, it's not pee, it is pee. You need a full bladder. You don't need a full bladder. Like it is kind of, you know, the jury is still out basically on like how exactly people can squirt and like what exactly is going on in there. But this is best guess. This is best hypothesis based on the science-backed education that I have access to.
Okay, fun.
That's amazing. And to kind of close this out, what are your advice on like how to like safely have anal sex?
Yeah, this is a good one because I feel like, you know, people in at least like monogamous relationships, at least like monogamous straight relationships, eventually you kind of do everything you can before anal, and then eventually everyone's like, all right, let's go for it. Well, you know, we only got so many holes, let's just kind of go, we only have one life to live on this planet, let's go for anal. And so you know, it's important to start slow, starting with fingers or small plugs and using copious amounts of lube. Again, I work at this amazing company called Uberlube. It's a silicone-based, long-lasting lube that's perfect for anal. A lot of people recommend it specifically for anal. And it's important to go slow, breathe, and communicate. And just to remember that the anus does not self-lubricate and has very sensitive tissue. So care is key. If you are, you know, someone who's interested in making sure that there's less of a mess before you do anal, like recognize that like it's a butt, and like if there's mess, that's okay. And like, you know, put down a towel if that's what you're interested in, because I think there is kind of this misconception of like, I need to be a clean, beautiful angel before doing anything with anal. It's kind of like, no, we don't. Like we have period sex, we do anal, like it, poop is part of the thing sometimes. And so if that is of interest to you, then yeah, know that could be part of it and put down a towel. And yeah, again, lube, go slow,
Lube.
start with fingers.
My husband always say, you play silly games, you get silly prizes.
Yeah.
Because like it's not always the cleanest situation. But
It's true.
I didn't know as a woman that you could have an anal orgasm.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
Anywhere where it's sensitive tissue like that, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I struggle a lot with, in the gay community, there was such an emphasis on cleaning before and being
Right.
clean enough. And, I mean, like I've hooked up with people and like some things happened and they're like, leave. Or,
Right. Ugh,
like I've been
terrible.
traumatized by things. And then I've also had the other side of that where I've been with like a regular partner and something happens and they're like, yeah, that happened. Who cares?
Yeah.
And then you're just
Right.
mortified and you're like, well, I'm sorry I ruined your sheets. But
Just like the queef, right?
Yeah.
We laugh about it, we move on. And like sex towels, are a big thing nowadays. Put down a sex towel, put down a big thing. You just throw it in the wash afterwards, clean what you need to clean, and that's kind of it.
That's
Yeah.
it. Okay. This has been so much fun. I honestly, I feel,
I've had a blast.
yeah, it's been really good. I feel like we've covered so many awesome topics. I could talk about sex all day. Like,
yeah, we could just keep going.
we could keep going,
Same.
but like we can't. So thank you so much for coming in. And you do have a podcasting network or workshop, coming up on May 27th and 29th. Do you want to give us a little thing about that quickly?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm a sex educator and also am an indie podcaster full time. This is my full time job. And so I've just become really passionate about teaching other podcasters and people who are interested in podcasting how to make money and how to do the thing. And so I'm not sure if this episode airs before May 27th, but if it does, then yeah, it would be great if you could share a little linky poodle doodle to my class if any podcasters out there are interested in joining my workshop.
I think you'll be seeing us at the workshop, or at least one of us
Yeah.
at the workshop. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yes.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. Again, we will link all of her links so you can connect. You can listen to her amazing podcast. And thank you so much for listening, guys. We will see you next week. Do you have anything you want to add before
No,
we go?
I think we got it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.